Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Maybe it's afternoon for some of you, so thanks for making it here today. We've got a great group on. I've been looking through the names who are joining us, a lot of familiar faces, but a lot of really new folks as well. And we know that really means that this topic and these speakers are very exciting to you, and they're also very exciting to us. So we're really excited to welcome them here today. So we are here for the morning or the first session of the day. We will have a second session here today. My name is Ariel Dukovic. I am head of communications here at ICLEI in Bonn, Germany. I'm really excited to give a warm welcome to Nigel Topping, who is our special guest this morning. And Nigel is the high-level champion for COP26, joining us to discuss COP26 and our road to that event. And Nigel comes to us as the champion, most recently as the CEO of We Mean Business. This is a coalition of businesses working together to accelerate the transition to a zero carbon economy. And prior to that, he was the executive director of CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project. So he has a long history of this, 18 years in the private sector, having worked in emerging markets and manufacturing. And I think this is such a great background for the role of champion, which was created at 2015 at the climate talks in Paris. And he's going to be working alongside our last climate champion, Gonzalo Munoz, who will be joining us this afternoon. Nigel's kind of main goal there is to help drive action from businesses, investors, organizations, and of course cities and regions on climate change and coordinating the work with the UNFCCC. And of course, this morning, we are joined by Yunus Arikan. Yunus leads the global policy and advocacy team here at ICLEI, and since 2013, he's led led our work with international bodies and multilateral agreements. And Yunus was really a pivotal figure in establishing the Bonn Center for Local Climate Action and Reporting, the Carbon Center, and served as the director of the Secretariat for the World's Mayors Council on Climate Change. And his background is in environmental engineering. So we're really excited about today's agenda. We're going to be, first, Yunus is going to take us through an introduction on cities and regions in the UNFCCC process. So for those of you who maybe are joining this LGMA webinar for the first time, you'll learn what LGMA stands for. Many of you may be old hat to that, so sit tight. And then, of course, we're going to get to the really interesting discussions with Nigel on the priorities towards COP26. And then finally, we have the Q&A. So we will, take questions throughout, but I'll be monitoring the questions and try to pick the ones that may be relevant for the moment. Otherwise, we'll keep them till the end, but do feel free to send them. Nigel has promised us an hour of his time, for which we're really grateful. So with that, I will hand things off to Yunus.
Thank you, Ariel. That's really a great pleasure to have your support in this, both today's webinar, but also in your capacity as our communications manager of our messages to the rest of our constituency, and also in the UNFCCC process as well. Ladies and gentlemen, it's really a great pleasure. As Ariel mentioned, we are eager to hear the vision and the plans of Nigel in how he plans to lead the process in the next couple of months. But it may be good, we thought, we start with some background. Obviously, we are talking about decades of work, and every year it's getting different momentum, different technical and political sensitivities. So it's also good to keep a memory behind ourselves. Just in my capacity as the focal point of local governments and municipal authorities constituency, let me give you a very short introduction in that sense. Paris Climate Agreement, of course, we are all excited. For cities and regions, it is particularly important because this has been a new document 20 years after the UNFCCC's in practice. Both in the UNFCCC and Kyoto Protocol, our biggest, let's say, concern was that there was no reference to the role of cities and regions. And after so many years of work, we have finally a preamble paragraph, which is the one that is signed by the heads of state. This is the historic document. There is a preamble paragraph which says that we recognize the importance of engagement of all levels of government. So this is a key sentence for us to claim that we have certain roles and responsibilities to the success of Paris Agreement, but sometimes, if we can comment, it's also responsible for the failure. Therefore, it is not anymore our voluntary work, but it's a mandate that we have all in our official procedures. The rest of the agreement is a long document. There are so many references to cities and other subnational authorities that is giving us the vision that it is really a hands-on, that we have to be part of this process. Just to recall, this has been a practice over this 20 years. We have been participating as a constituency, which is the LGMA as we call about it. This was particularly on the way to Copenhagen. I had an ambitious agenda, and finally in Paris we made our success. But it was not just our call. The technical negotiations, and until Paris Agreement, the most important one was the 2014 UN Climate Summit that became very, very instrumental for many initiatives, such as Compact of Mayors was also created at that moment. And after Paris, so we didn't stop, of course. We continued our work. We didn't necessarily have a roadmap because we had now implementation of our advocacy in every element of the Paris Agreement and other UNFCCC agendas. But we have additional tools like Marrakesh Partnership, which we will go through now very soon, which was an additional opportunity for us to interact with the UN and the national governments. Talanoa dialogues was a remarkable moment. We have mobilized in more than 60 countries that for the first time we were able to discuss the NDCs at home with the national and local governments and regional governments and other stakeholders. So it was really a momentum for us to say that NDCs can be better and should be better. Obviously, 2018 Global Climate Action Summit, Nigel was there as a different hat, driving business communities there, had played a huge role. And in 2019 UN Climate Action Summit had also prepared a background for us to be paving the way for more ambitious NDCs. We all say that this is a process, and every year we have the existing leadership, which is the presidencies that are called, and the country will host it. They will also have their teams gathering together. So it's like a combination of two teams. Chile is now under the leadership of Minister of Environment Carolina Schmidt. We have worked a lot. Gonzalo is helping her in particular in the action agenda, and in the UK side we have the Secretary of State Alok Sharma, which is leading the negotiations, and Nigel is there in the action agenda. And this time UK has also an additional let's say figure, which is Finance Advisor Mark Carney. And in this architecture, I think in between we will be meeting also in Bonn, or the negotiation will possibly meet in Bonn, so that there is a continuity of the agendas. The last before is that this climate agenda is every year continuing with regular, let's say, engagements like showcasing our summits or participating in consultations or working with friends of multi-level action or interventions. And every year presidency has their own such agendas. In the case of the UK presidency, we have heard about adaptation and resilience, nature, energy, clean road transport, and finance. And by the time we left Madrid, we have announced our vision for COP in Glasgow to make it as the multi-level action COP under 6 priority areas, to raise ambition in collaboration with the champions, to make sure NDCs are vertical integrated and more ambitious. Climate finance, what we have achieved so far, should be materialized. Balance between mitigation and adaptation, linking circular economy and nature, and advance and expand global climate action, in particularly reaching out to the other line ministers like ministers of urbanization, ministers of youth, ministers of culture, so that it is a collective effort. Obviously, we will see how all these agendas that we have announced before will shape now after the pandemic, and that's what we are here for. And I'd like to conclude with a warm congratulations and appreciation to all partners who under the LGMA who are now we're collaborating under the working group towards the COP. So these contributions will be giving us the chance that our inputs from different regions, different networks, national and global, that we will come to Glasgow with our results, and we will be much more even ambitious than ever, so that we can help champions and the presidencies to deliver the expectations. With this, I'd like to give the floor back to Ariel, and eager to hear Nigel. Once again, it's really a great pleasure to have him joining us, and once again, thanks a lot.
Great. Thanks, Yunus. So there are no questions yet. So Nigel, I'll turn things over to you.
Great. Thank you, Ariel, and thank you, Yunus, for laying the foundation. Every time I hear you, I'm impressed with the level of collaboration actually amongst the local government community, and that last slide really, I think, speaks loudly to one of the things that Gonzalo and I are really keen to be champions of, which is radical collaboration, where we make sure that the tension which sometimes arises between institutions working in the same area is put aside in the face of such an important issue as addressing climate change, and of course addressing the coronavirus. And I know that's something that's on at the front of our minds as citizens, but also as leaders, and nowhere more so than in the local government community, I'm sure, who really are on the front line of having to deal with the crisis. So I thought I'd just spend a few minutes just introduce myself, say a little bit about the HighLevel Champions team, because we're making some changes, and then I wanted to talk a bit about the future of the Marrakesh partnership, which Yunus has mentioned, and I want to start by sharing some of the principles which we are committed to embedding in the work. So I think, you know, we often go straight to the spreadsheet of emissions, which is important because that's our job to think about how we work on mitigation and adaptation. But the way that we work together is a really crucial enabler of the level of ambition and the pace of change. So we wanted to lay something out in terms of principles of working, which you can also hold me and Gonzalo accountable for if you feel we're not living up to them. So it's also an attempt to be really transparent about our commitments. And then I wanted to say something kind of in a way, a little bit of a response to your roadmap, which I'm really keen to hear more about in more detail, Yunus. But thank you for laying that out. Just to share some of the priorities we have for COP26. And then I thought I'd end with just a couple of reflections on the impact and the implications of COVID-19, which of course is affecting all of our work and represents some real challenges. But you know, as always with change, also there's always risks and opportunities. So some things that we're seeing that we will need to do differently in the now extended time we have before we all meet in person, I hope, in Glasgow for COP26 sometime next year. So I just want to say a couple of words about that to close, and then very happy to take questions and answers. Okay, Yunus has already introduced me. I thought one thing, so you know, my background really is with the private sector, both as a practitioner and then working. Although in my time at CDP, I did start to get to understand and started appreciating the importance of and the power of cities in tackling the climate crisis. So Yunus and I have known each other quite a long time because of the work that ICLEI and CDP have done on transparency and worked together over the years. Of course, I've also got to know C40 and GCOM. But I don't know the LGMA as an organisation, so it's really lovely to meet you. It's the first time, and to realise actually that there's more structure and more organisation than I had known until Yunus invited me to speak here. I did for a while act as an advisor to the Coalition for Urban Transitions on their report on the importance of urban policy in national strategy, which I thought was a really powerful call to action for governments, and really helps put the importance of cities, and not just the biggest cities in the world. I think in their report there's a really important graphic which shows, you know, the potential impact of mega cities, and then the potential impact of other cities, and I think they're about equal, right? So there's often a I think it's an easy trap to think that, if we just get, in other words, I know it's not just C40, right, who are a really important leadership group, but the far bigger group of cities all around the world, which you represent, is equally important, although more dispersed. But I think that really helped me being involved with the CUT for a while to understand some of the nuances of the local government community. As Yunus says, I'm working with Gonzalo Munoz. I'd say Gonzalo and I have very quickly formed a strong working relationship. It feels very aligned. I'm really impressed with what he did in a relatively short time in the run-up to COP25 in the context that he had to face. Remember, he was appointed late because Brazil was going to host the COP, and then Chile took over. I think Gonzalo wasn't in position until like April last year, or May maybe. So really only had 6 months, and in that time, he, I think, really has reinvigorated the Marrakesh partnership, and he's got us all to agree in that crucial year last year that the North Star is net zero by 2050 at the latest. So it's putting us on the best possible trajectory to stay below 1.5 degrees. And you all know that that's not a trivial change, right? That's a very, very material change in the global political context and in the scientific assessment of what the risks we face. And of course, cities also at the front line of many of those risks. So really important that we work hard to put adaptation in the mix as well. And I know personally that's something I've got to keep working on, is putting adaptation back in the mix, because I've been very focused on mitigation. So one of the things I invite Yunus and Ariel and others to do is to catch me if I'm just going too mitigation heavy. And I think given your constituency and just how vulnerable many coastal cities in particular are, I know that you as a community have adaptation very much on your radar in balance with mitigation. One thing that we've been able to do in the last few months, we've been very blessed with a very positive response from the climate community to grow the size of the team supporting the champions. Historically, it's been a very small team. The champions have not succeeded in getting the UNFCCC to provide any funding. So we've there's a great network, as you know, because you're part of it, of very committed organizations working on climate change. We all know that COP26 is a really important year. It's the first real test of the Paris Agreement, of the ratchet mechanism. Can we all collectively step up and be more ambitious? I think all of us on the call believe that we are and we can, but it's still to be proven, and we've got to do all we can individually and seek to also support parties, the countries, in raising their ambition. So we've been able to grow the team. So we have a stronger team, which means that we can support the community in improving the quality and the use and dissemination of the products that we've been able to create as a Marrakesh partnership. So really keen to work with you on that. I'm delighted that we have Agathe Cavicchioli from C40, who'll be a friend to many of you, I know, seconded part-time in the team. We actually realized that part-time secondments are better than full-time secondments, because what we're really wanting is bridges with the community that we're serving. So that's great. So we've got more bandwidth as a team than the Champions team has had in the past. Of course, one of our objectives is to make sure that lasts beyond COP26. So we're very focused on making COP26 a success, but also looking how can we make sure that an African presidency and an African champion also have more infrastructure to support the Marrakesh partnership community, so that we continue to build on all the work that you've done over the years. And one thing I just have to call out Yunus. Yunus, it feels like Yunus has been involved in this process forever, and represents really deep institutional memory, and it's really, really valuable, right? This is one of the risks of a rotating presidency and rotating champions, is that you always come fresh and try and start from scratch and don't appreciate all the amazing work that's been done before, and why things maybe sometimes don't look quite logical, but there's always a story behind it, right, Yunus? So I really appreciate Yunus and ICLEI and you as a community in providing the continuity, right? Because you'll still be working on this even when I'm not the champion after COP27 and I have to find something else to do. So I think finding out the ways to build in more continuity is also really important to us. So that's just a sort of introduction to me and the team. And I wanted to then just say a little bit about these principles that Gonzalo and I committed to embedding. We can, so we've already shared. We can share these in writing if you want to share them with everyone on the call. Very happy to do that. So this is just an attempt actually to lay out our commitment as champions and as a team to the principles we think need to inform our work as a community. So there's 5 of them. The first one is that we commit to accelerating action above all else. So, our mission collectively and our mandate as champions is to accelerate action, right? We're facing an emergency. It's a planetary, human, natural, and economic emergency. We know that it's orders of magnitude more of an emergency than COVID. Actually, it doesn't feel as urgent because it unfolds more slowly, but we know that 7 million people die prematurely every year from air pollution from the same sources as causing global warming alone, and then there are all the other fragilities to extreme weather events. So accelerating action is the #1 principle. That should be our focus, and that should drive how we think about collaboration and how we think of everything we do. Second principle is really the one to stop champions thinking that they can come in and start brilliant new things without spending the time to appreciate what's already going on. So the second principle is that we will build on the fantastic work that has been done to date. So that we will spend time to understand and appreciate the great work that's been done, what works and what doesn't work. But there's always history, and even when things haven't worked, it's not because people haven't thought about them or tried. Right? So being very respectful of the amazing work that's been done to date. So this is why it's a joy for me to see the quality of the work that you're doing, even in those few slides which Yunus puts up. I can just see just how much thoughtful collaboration there's been over the years from you as a community. The third principle is that we will be driven by the science. And I think the COVID crisis really highlights the importance of us and the people we work with as leaders taking the best scientific evidence very seriously. And I was talking to some of the IPCC yesterday, and we know that with the delay of COP, we will have some IPCC scientific reports being presented next year. Working Group 1 was scheduled to be published in April. It may be delayed a bit, but I think it's likely that it will be before a COP, and that it's likely that it will show that once again, as every single time the IPCC has looked at the risks are being assessed as higher than we thought last time. So this sense not only of needing to take the science seriously, but taking account of the fact that every time the scientists assess the risks with a 3 or 4 year gap, our understanding shows that the risks are higher than we thought. So that trajectory is not a good one, right? We know that the likelihood of risks has gone up because we haven't had an adequate policy response, but the amplitude of risks. So if you think of that normal 2-dimensional risk assessment matrix, global risk management has completely failed. We've gone from bottom left to top right. And cities, of course, are at the front line of feeling those risks, but also leading the charge now to turn the policy tide to make sure that we address those risks. The fourth principle is one about collaboration. It's that we will celebrate and play to our unique strengths. So it's not just building on what's been done before, but taking time to acknowledge that all of us committed to action bring different assets and different strengths. And that's an asset as a community. So rather than have different approaches be something which divides us, recognize that nobody knows exactly how to solve a problem as big as this, and it's good to have people come at this with different approaches and different assets. So that appreciation for different strengths makes us stronger as a community, and that's something we need globally in the face of a crisis such as climate change or COVID. And then the final one is to be open and generous, so to work collaboratively and transparently and invite the best from everybody to contribute. So those are principles that Gonzalo and I are committed to. We may tweak them over the year if we think that there's duplication or something missing. So I'd love to hear from anybody about what they think are the sort of important principles. And part of the reason we think of principles is that really this is an open source movement, in the sense that this is not a hierarchical movement. I know we have some hierarchy, like we have to have some hierarchy to get organized. So we have high-level champions, right? And we have focal points in the Marrakesh Partnership. But really this has to be a movement that is open, and open movements work best when we're aligned on principles, as well as having a structure where appropriate and clarity. So those are the principles. And I think we have plenty of time for questions and answers if you want to. Let me say something then about the priorities that Gonzalo and I have set out for the champions. Let me go in the reverse order to the way I normally describe them. So I've already mentioned one, which is like, sometimes we say 5 plus 1. It's 5 objectives for COP26 plus 1 for the legacy, for making sure we have the infrastructure for the decade of delivery. So that's the 6th one, is to work on that decade of delivery infrastructure, so that, as I say, after COP26, when we have an African champion, they inherit not just a work program, but some resources to provide some continuity to that. So that's the 6th one, which is long term. The 5th one is about shaping the narrative. We think that the success of the COP is, of course, partly objective, like what actually happens by then and at the event. So how many cities commit to and are on track to net zero, how many governments have enhanced their NDCs, what that all means in aggregate. Of course, those are material, but it's also partly about the narrative which emerges. If we think of Paris, Paris set us on track for a 3 to 4 degree world, right? So we could have decided as a global community that Paris was a failure, but no, the narrative was that Paris was a wild success, because we had set ourselves and agreed collectively that the benchmark of success was that we would agree on long-term temperature goals and mechanisms to ensure that we got there. So we had the NDCs and the long-term strategies and the 5-year ratchet and some of the other things we all thought were key. But we agreed globally that was a success. We could have decided it was a failure. So deciding what expectations are, managing expectations, deciding what story we tell about in the run-up to and at Glasgow is really important. So I want to make sure we pay attention to the way that story is unfolding. And to do that, we think, and here's an area where I do think cities have a real role, because they're often so much closer to citizens, finding ways for more meaningful engagement for more constituencies. There's a lot of frightened, angry, overwhelmed people, young people, but also of all ages, on the streets every Friday or online every Friday now, striking virtually. There are a lot of people with legitimate fears who struggle to find a way to turn that into agency. So we think that's another really important thing. It's interesting, Yunus mentioned the Talanoa dialogue. One of the ideas we have is maybe we should reintroduce something like that, a kind of multi-stakeholder dialogue, which gives a voice to many more stakeholders and provides a kind of respectful listening format. So that's the 4th one, which would be enhancing human engagement. The 3rd objective is, of course, supporting national governments and enhancing their own ambition. So making sure that national governments know just how much ambition and action and innovation there is amongst cities, businesses, investors, states and regions. Often they don't know, right? It's happening so fast, it's changing so fast, but there are so many good stories. So we think we need to do a better job. So we're working to help support the UK government in their diplomatic outreach to make sure they're aware of just how much is going on. But then the first 2 are the ones that are really about ambition. And number 1 is just to have a massive increase in net zero ambition. Gonzalo and I said we need 10 times as many businesses, cities, investors committed to net zero by COP26 as we had in Madrid. And we think that's possible because we know there's a lot of momentum. We know everybody's getting aligned to that. We also know there are some challenges it's harder in some countries, in some cities, in some sectors than others. But we think that it's really important as a non-state actor community that we send a very loud signal to national governments that we understand that the science says we've got to get to net zero by 2050 as soon as possible, and we're committed to doing it. And here's what we're doing, and here's what help we need from other people. But we're not waiting for national governments to be the silver bullet. We know it's going to take everybody. And to do that, you'll all be aware of the Climate Ambition Alliance, which was launched at the Secretary General Summit last year and given a boost in Madrid. So the champions are responsible for trying to raise the non-state actor membership of that. The presidencies are working on getting more countries to commit to net zero. So we're on the 5th of June on World Environment Day. We'll be sort of relaunching in a way, turning that into our campaign. We're going to call it Race to Zero. So I'm really pleased to see ambition at the top of the list of your roadmap. And so we'd love to work with you to get as many cities as possible over the next month until COP26, when we know when it is, to stand up and say we too are committed to net zero, and here's what we're doing in the short term to put us on track to do that. And then finally, we're really committed to building on the great start that the Marrakesh Partnership 1.5 degree climate action pathways provided the world last year. This is a really revolutionary collaborative initiative to say we as partners from all over the world, from all different sectors, come together to say, here's our plan to get to 1.5 degrees. And we know that all of those plans could be improved, and we know that all of them could be used more to encourage others to step up and commit to those plans and to help national governments. So that's what we're committed to doing now, and the bulk of the additional team that we've put together is going to help drive that. So we're going to work with you to support you in taking those pathways that were there last year, making them 10 times more impactful, and particularly trying to get more granular in terms of what the pathways are and what different actors can do, so that by Glasgow we can actually tell the story of lots of cities, businesses, investors, and we hope line ministers, because we think this mashing up of state and non-state is one of the most important innovations that has started in the process. You know, we had more line ministers coming to Madrid than previously, and I think I'd really be keen to explore and hear from you about your thoughts on. I know you've got some thoughts about whether the human settlements theme should remain one theme, or whether buildings and infrastructure should become a separate theme or a sub-theme. I don't know. Clearly, buildings and infrastructure is a really important topic that needs to be focused on to drive decarbonisation, but also then the leadership of cities. So maybe we need to have a buildings and environment, buildings and infrastructure theme and day, and maybe we need to have a cities leadership theme and day as well. I don't think they need to be mutually exclusive. I think it's possible to think of both, but I think the idea of bringing more leadership across sectors and across stakeholders is one that we're really committed to. So what we set ourselves a target is in at least 10 sectors by Glasgow, being able to tell the story of having reached a tipping point. And you can see this everywhere. You see this, you know, we're working with the global telecommunications industry. They're on track to have 50% of all mobile phone connections be run by companies who are committed to net zero, or the work that Paul Polman's been doing and the UNFCCC have been doing on the apparel sector. Over 66 of the world's biggest fashion companies committed to net zero. Are you even starting to see it in the oil and gas industry? Now we have 4 oil and gas majors verbally committed to net zero, that we're still waiting for some more detail of their plans. But so we think there's a real opportunity, and I think both in the built environment and cities as a stakeholder group, we should be able to tell the story by Glasgow that we've reached critical mass, that if you're not on board, then you're at risk of being seen as being a laggard and actually losing out, whether you're a mayor seeking re-election, a CEO trying to maintain share price, or a politician or a party politician seeking re-election. We think that the next 5 years is going to be the years that everybody decides whether they're for an ambitious transition to net zero, or whether they're not, and those who are not are going to lose. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more, and Yunus has already, and Agat have given me a bit of a flavour of some of your thoughts, but I think over the next 2 or 3 months we'll concretise those. Our aim will be to publish the Marrakesh Partnership Pathways version 2 with deeper dives per sector. September, we hope. We're just looking at the timeline now. The reason we say that is obviously September will be a month when we think the world will start to look more deeply at climate change again. We'll have an UNGA week. There'll be a virtual climate week at the end of September. In October, there'll be a big TED countdown event, which we think will have a lot of focus on it. And then in November, we're looking at, with partners, putting on a series of what we're calling, I don't know, zero carbon dialogues. I'm not sure exactly, but the idea being to try and not have mass events with thousands of people, but have curated conversations, just as we experimented with this first Petersburg multi-stakeholder dialogue, but try and organize those around these decarbonisation pathways so that we can accelerate learning and build momentum to get more people to commit to these pathways. So we'll share more of that through ICLEI and the Marrakesh Partnership partners shortly. And of course, by then we'll know when the COP will be, so we'll have a shared timeline. So let me just end by saying a little bit about COVID-19 and the implications for COP, because obviously the number one is that the COP is delayed. And I'm guessing all of us are processing what's going on right now in our own ways. I know personally, I think I was in denial for a long time and was thinking, oh, we'll be back to normal by June, and then the COP will be delayed a bit, but basically the world will be the same. Of course, we're all realizing now that the world will be fundamentally changed in our lives, and probably in history. There'll be pre-COVID-19 and post-COVID-19, and we don't know what will change yet. It's too soon to tell. We don't know how the economic recession will be a driver of positive change, like accelerating moves to more walking and cycling, or how much it will be an accelerator of negative change, like an acceleration of trade tensions and nationalism. So we're all in a very uncertain time and trying to do what we can to influence in a positive direction. So some of you will know, but the process of deciding to delay and when is not, it's not mine and Gonzalo's, it's not even the presidents of either the current of Chile or the incoming of the UK. It's decided by the multilateral process by a subset of countries representing the different blocks called the COP Bureau. They met last month to agree to postpone till 2021, and since then the Secretariat of the UNFCCC, Gonzalo, myself, and the UK and Chilean presidencies have been consulting with parties and non-party stakeholders on thoughts of the pros and cons of different timings. We're hopeful that by the end of this month or early next month, the COP Bureau will meet again and make a final decision. We know there's a lot of things to juggle. Number one is the health of participants. So there's obviously it's not going to happen. That's why already postponed to next year. Number two would be to try and avoid the risk of having to postpone twice. Then you then lose the opportunity to actually schedule at all because the whole calendar gets blocked up. Number three, there are some practical issues, like in the UK, we have local government elections, as you know, in May, and the European Football Championships are in Glasgow as one of the host cities in June, which makes policing two international events very unlikely. Obviously August we tend to avoid for European holiday reasons. We've also got UK hosting G7 and Italy hosting G20, so you've got the COP presidencies, and both with other big multilateral events to host. So all those we don't know, and I think that I would summarize the feedback that I've heard as most people see clarity as more important than timing. Some people think we should do it much earlier, worried about momentum. Other people think we should do it later because it'll be easier and more chance of success. But I haven't heard really strong views either way. More of a sort of appreciation of the complexity and a sort of sense of supporting the UNFCCC and the presidencies once a decision is made to make sure that whatever the new date is a success. With my team, we've been working on sort of contingencies of 6 months or 12 months delay, so May or November, because we think it won't be far, or it won't be, that gives us enough difference to plan in terms of resources and timeline. But as I say, I'm hopeful by mid-June we'll all know, and then we can have a clear timeline, and all of those other events which are uncertain will start to land and be concretized. But of course, the other implication is that the vast majority of leadership bandwidth is focused on COVID recovery, because it's a human health crisis first of all, and a economic crisis second, and both of those are real short-term emergencies. So obviously climate change is a very important emergency, but it rolls out over a longer time period. So I think at the moment, our sense is, Gonzalo and I, is that we have an opportunity and responsibility to continue to get organized as a climate community, but to have real empathy for those in leadership positions who are having to deal with the short-term emergency. I know, for example, in the UK's case, Alok Sharma, the incoming president, he's the business secretary of state, right? So I'm actually glad that he's spending most of his time trying to figure out how to stop millions of people being unemployed as millions of small and medium-sized enterprises go bankrupt. And so whilst of course the climate campaigner in me would like to have more of his attention, I totally understand, right? And it will come back, and it's been impressive to see how the machinery of government is keeping the climate work going, despite the fact that the ministers really have to focus on the short-term emergency. I think there are some other implications in terms of the need for us as a community to really focus on having a voice and a view on COVID recovery measures, because we know that the quality of those measures will either lock in carbon or accelerate decarbonisation. So we can't just say we'll wait until all that's done and then we'll get back to talking about carbon and climate. Adaptation and resilience and mitigation will be shaped by the response. So we need to engage in that, and I know that city leaders and city organisations and local government organisations are engaging in those conversations. And I'll say finally, it has implications for narrative, right? Is that health and resilience are at the front of everybody's mind now, and we haven't always, when talking about climate, made the case that addressing climate will improve the health of our citizenry and the resilience of our economies. So I think there's a lesson to be learned about thinking about a narrative from the point of view of the audience, rather than sometimes we lead a bit too much from our own understanding of the science and the solutions, and we sound like geeky, as I say, GHG spreadsheet jockeys, rather than political leaders, which we all are with a small p, right? We're all trying to influence people and help find the common ground where accelerating action on climate change delivers other benefits to society, as well as averting climate catastrophe. So I think that you'll see that more in the language that Gonzalo and I use, and we hope that that's something that as a community we can align on some of that. As I said, I already feel like clean, healthy, resilient recoveries or resets is the language that we're hearing more of. We're trying to avoid using the language of Green New Deal, for example, because we think that's quite politicized, and it's not our position to be politicized in a partisan sense. So we're trying to find language which works across party divides. So we think health and resilience are not politicized, and hope they never do become politicized. So Ariel, that's all I wanted to share, and I'm happy to take any questions if people have got some for now, and I'll do my best to answer them transparently, as I've committed to.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for that. It was very illuminating, and there's definitely some follow-up questions here. So you've caught people's attention for sure. So first off, Natalia asks, can you talk a little bit more about the priorities regarding adaptation? She's particularly interested in, how she can and her colleagues can contribute. You mentioned the Race to Zero campaign for mitigation. Is there anything sort of similar for adaptation?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, it's so first of all, I sort of declare some of my experiential blind spots. So I said, I've worked mostly with the private sector. So because I have, as I said, Yunus and I think it's probably 10 years since we started doing the work on transparency and reporting in cities, right, Yunus? But my sort of comfort zone is business, manufacturing business. So I really need your help in making sure that I have enough understanding of the issues facing cities and the responses from cities. Similarly, my experience is biased towards mitigation, so I have to work harder on that. We have Dan Hamza-Goodacre, who some of you will know from his work at Climate Works, on the team and leading our work on adaptation. As Yunus said, the UK presidency has put adaptation and resilience as one of the 5 themes. The question about campaigns is a really good one. Reducing emissions is so much easier to talk about and build a campaign around, right? Because you have get to zero, race to zero. It's easy at least to headline. We know that actions are very difficult. So one thing that we're grappling with is how do we? And one thing, and I've had a lot of teach-ins with the adaptation and resilience community, and I'm working hard with Dan to try and find a simpler way of talking about resilience. I mean, an example would be the fact that in this community, we often talk about adaptation and resilience. And if you just think about that from a ordinary local government official or mayor or person in the street, why do we say adaptation and resilience? It doesn't really make sense in just a natural language. We say that because that has a meaning in negotiations. So this is when we lead with negotiations speak, we don't take people with us. People are like, what are you talking about? And I know there's technical difference between adaptation and resilience, and so when you're talking to negotiators or parties, it's important to use the right language, but we're not often talking to those, we're not negotiating. So I don't have a really good answer to how we package adaptation and resilience yet, but it's something that we're working on really hard with Dan, with the Global Commission on Adaptation, with the Global Resilience Partnership, which the UK's got David Howlett from DFID leading on. So I would put that as a good question that I don't know the answer to yet, but one that I think we need to do a better job collectively of answering. And it feels to me like there's the adaptation and resilience community is still fragmented and still kind of fighting over what the language that we use, and that we need to get over that, because whenever we're fighting over the language that we use, what it means is we're talking to ourselves and not talking to other people who we need to influence. So any ideas about how we can do that? That's a work in progress, I think, for now.
Great. So this comment, the question also came from Natalia Uribe, and she has an idea or wonders if you have any plans to build some kind of platform to showcase initiatives that are already working or can be labeled or branded under the COP process to help engage others and accelerate action on particularly adaptation.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, we don't have a I mean, this is a great idea, right? To have a platform to showcase. The question always is, there's always two questions with that kind of idea for me is, and I'm remembering my good friend Caroline Holtom, who leads communications at Women Business, is that platforms are very difficult to build. So building a new platform,
and maintain.
Build, maintain, and attract audience, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, all those things, and that tends to cost a lot of money also. So I'm just wary of the solution being build a new platform rather than maybe try and find platform partners that already exist. So one example I would say would be the TED partnership. So working with TED Countdown, that's an amazing platform, and the partnership includes YouTube. Already TED Ed, the educational part of TED, have launched a whole series of climate education videos. So I would be inclined to think about audience and platform and partnering with the right platforms, because I think content isn't the problem, right? There's plenty of good content. The problem is getting that content on platforms to get to the audience that you need. So Natalia, that would be my sense, is rather than having a champions platform for climate stories, which I fear would, after 2 years, be unresourced, because we would be very difficult to get to scale. It would be far better for us to think about who might be the platform partners or the channel partners who we can then channel stories to. One of the things I did last year, Women Business, was help launch something called the Global Commons Alliance with the Global Environment Facility, WRI, the Potsdam Institute, and others. And part of that was to extend the idea of science-based targets from climate to other environmental planetary boundaries. With Johan Rockström launched an Earth Commission to try and get the clarity of science down to the net zero or 1.5 degrees that we have for climate for the other boundaries. And one of the initiatives that's part of that is something called Earth HQ, which Tim Kelly, who is the founder of National Geographic Television, is incubating. And that's an example, I think, of a platform where he's going to have the very best of journalism and the very best of modern capability for getting stories to, especially to new demographics, to younger demographics. So that would be my sense, Natalia, is let's maybe think about who the audiences we're trying to reach and who are the platforms that maybe already have access to them that we can then plug into.
And this is also a question from Polly Billington, I think about audiences as well. So she says, we're a local leadership climate network in the UK, drawing on the experience of local governments in the COVID-19 crisis. And she's wondering how to position these local leaders as having a wealth of experience on dealing with crises, especially towards national governments, and then of course specifically the UK government. And I think that's, maybe we can even broaden it more generally, what are the kinds of messages that you think are going to be the most effective for local governments to be bringing to their national governments and to COP?
Yeah, good question. I think the first thing I would say is to try and avoid it being a local government versus national government narrative. Like, we're the ones who really have to deal with crisis. You're the ones who sit in your ivory tower, because there's always a temptation narratives to say we're special and better rather than we're special and different, which is very different. I mean, having seen and spoken to some national ministers in the last few weeks and some members of civil services dealing with some of these issues, I don't envy them, and neither do I envy mayors of cities having to deal with this, right? But it's not like. So I think make it a both and would be the first thing, because I think as soon as it's, it's the same thing we try and do with businesses. Don't make it like government is rubbish, business will solve the solution. That's kind of not helpful, right? Because we need everybody, right? And it's a whole system. So that'd be my first thing. I do think there's a really valid case, which I think local government organisations have made over the years, and is one of the reasons they've been welcomed into the UNFCCC process as non-state actors, is the point about executive power at the front line. At the front line of energy, housing, transport, waste management, health now. So I think that's a really important case to be made. And the other thing I would say is agility, like the ability to move fast, because I do think as you get more hierarchical and bigger systems, it's generally harder for people to put it. So I think we've got now, the more we can have examples of fast, effective, science-led response from city leaders, from local government leaders, I think those are analogies that will resonate well. And I think saying what cities are, and the other thing I always say is making sure that the ask from national governments is matched with a commitment. So here's what we're doing, and we could go faster, or we'd love to see this from national government. So I think those would be my sort of guiding principle. I think that applies to, and I think to the specific question. I think you just need to find the specific stories of COVID responses where local leadership has exemplified being science-led, timely, agile. Yeah.
Great. So we've, I think, a nice question to end on here with 2 more minutes left. A little bit of a different perspective, but I think a great one. So Hector Garcia says, I'm a proactive UK citizen. Are there any volunteer opportunities to help ICLEI or the We Mean Business coalition doing climate action or climate policy related activities?
Well, you have to ask ICLEI about ICLEI and We Mean Business about We Mean Business. I mean, the champions, the team that Gonzalo and I have put together is largely secondees, so people who've been seconded from their own organisation. We, I think we'd be uncomfortable about taking unpaid volunteers. So our preferred model is that either an NGO or a private sector organisation or a local government organisation seconds somebody and continues to pay them. We know there are people who would do the work for free, but I think that's a dangerous. It's like unpaid internships. I think it's a dangerous. It's a dangerous pattern to fall into, to become reliant on individual charity to institutions. We shouldn't need to do that. So I think if anyone is interested in a secondment opportunity, I'm sure ICLEI, We Mean Business, and I know the Champions team are very, very open to that. We need diversity, and there's an almost infinite amount of work to do. So it's not like we're over-resourced for any of this work. So thank you for the very generous question, Hector.
So maybe we can end now. Just a question from me. Maybe one word from Nigel and from Yunus about how you're feeling moving towards June 5th, and also sort of the newest announcements that you'll be making soon. What's your overall feeling?
I'm feeling resolute, like I'm feeling determined and positive, and that we've got a job to do, but we've got the resources to do it. So that's more than one word. One word, yeah. Resolute.
Okay, fantastic. Yunus, how about you?
Well, I'm even worse in terms of only one word, but at least I showed the slide where is our short-term calendar. I'm particularly happy, Nigel, you mentioned about the 5th of June, and on the way we will be building a number of things. That is also this time, this is the super year for nature. Next month we will have a specific focus on nature. There will be special celebrations. For me, the one word is that maybe not word, but not to give up. I mean, we should not give up, and especially as Nigel mentioned, if the world is able to solve or respond to a crisis like COVID, why not? We cannot solve the other challenges, and I think that is the passion and that is the message we should convey. So I'm very happy and grateful for Nigel. And maybe a specific comment for him. I think all the champions in the past, there were really very perfect people in the perfect time, and that is particularly the case for Nigel. I mean, in a moment when this year, having someone inside this process and then coming him and giving him the power to not just criticize or outside or showcasing, but now inside as a seating driver's seat to guide the national government to the UNFCCC is perfectly an opportunity for us. Therefore, I'm sure this will not be the last time we will meet with him. I'm very happy to hear his openness. So therefore, I'm really let's say thinking that we're having a refreshed moment. It was really good that we had this 1 month after, because we had discussed last month we would be having this, but now it's really, we have a better understanding of your plans. In the afternoon we will hear from Gonzalo. So I think we are all ready to scale it up and under your leadership. So it's perfect that we are able to now move things more faster and in a scale. Thank you, Ariel, also. Wonderful. For all your help.
Thank you, Ariel. Thank you, Yunus. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the day. And say hi to Gonzalo for me.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye.